Hi, my name is Sarah Clark and welcome to the next video of Power to the Plurals. In this video, I want to help to debunk the myth that people who are schizophrenic hear voices from the outside, whereas people with DID hear voices from the inside. Let's dive deep. So around 2 weeks ago, I was at this conference here in the Netherlands in Ede. It was about early childhood trauma and the theory of structural dissociation. It was hosted by uitgeverij and they had 3 main speakers, Kathy Steele, Onno van der Hart and Suzette Boon. It was extremely informative and I learned tons of new things that I'm super excited about to share with you here on YouTube. So the first thing that I wanted to address that I learned at this conference is that apparently people who are schizophrenic don't hear voices from the outside, and people who are DID don't necessarily hear voices from the inside. If you have been hanging around in the online DID community, you might know that we have spread this information for a long time. I'm not really sure who started this myth, and I was myself part of it as well, of spreading this information, and many YouTube videos here explain the same thing. But if we listen to the expert in this field, it's not how it works. So I started this journey to find an answer to this question around a year ago, when I started a poll in Alternation, our support group for those with DID. And in that poll, I asked people if they hear voices, and if so, if they hear them from the outside, from the inside, or both, or something else, and if they were diagnosed with DID or schizophrenia or both. The results were very interesting, and a lot of people participated in this poll, for which I'm very grateful. So 120 people said yes, they hear voices from the inside and were diagnosed with DID. Around 45 people said that they hear voices both from the inside and the outside. And around 10 people said that they hear voices only from the outside. Some people then commented in the comments section that they are diagnosed with both DID and schizophrenia. And those people diagnosed with schizophrenia pointed out that this theory is not correct, that it does not work like that, and that their therapist didn't explain it like that to them. So after this, I tried to find an answer. I emailed a couple of people, but I didn't get the answer. So when I was at this conference, you could submit questions, and I just submitted this question 3 times in a different sentence. And hopefully I would get an answer. Well, it worked. So here it is. This information was given mostly by Kathy Steele, but the others also pitched in, so I translated that to English freely. But yeah, I'm glad to share this information here because I think it's really important that we get this correct and that we get our facts straight in the DID community, in the online community, especially as community leaders, that we take that responsibility, admit our mistakes to the DID community and other folks who are watching this, and then spread the correct information. So here it is. The difference between voices in DID versus schizophrenia are the following. If you have DID, you've heard voices from before the age of 10. You might hear us say from time to time that childhood trauma and DID happened before the age of 5 to 9, depending on which study you follow. So it makes sense that these folks in Ede at the conference said that people start hearing voices before the age of 10, right? In childhood, we might not be aware that these voices are not our own, or we might think they're very much not ourselves and they are imaginary friends or people on the outside that we experience. And some people are aware in childhood that the voices are from other people inside of them as well. That is possible. Schizophrenia has a spontaneous onset, which means it can start out of nowhere or it can start because of a cause, like a trauma or a traumatic experience or an overwhelming experience, for example. With DID, obviously it caused early in childhood and then the rest of our lives until we heal that bothers us. Whereas with schizophrenia, it's not there in childhood like our DID is. Obviously, if they have schizophrenia in childhood, it's there in childhood, but generally speaking, it starts later in life, and they don't experience the voices in childhood. They don't experience it at all until one day they wake up and they hear the voices, and that's very different with DID. That being said, we also know there are people who have DID who for a long time just were able to live their life normally, and all of a sudden are faced with the fact that they have DID, and then maybe they can find back signs, but during those years, they didn't know they heard voices, Or maybe they thought everyone did, but they didn't think they had DID because they heard the voices. So it's very interesting how it differs per person, but I think in general this is correct, how they explained it at the conference. We with DID hear our voices constantly, so they never really go away. Sometimes, of course, sometimes it goes silent. We see those posts as well, and it's very concerning for people, including myself. I freak out every time, but it's normal. They always come back, right? That's like how we explain it to ourselves and to others. They always come back. Take a deep breath. But in general, we always hear the voices, or we can always hear the voices if we tap into our inner world. Those with schizophrenia have no control over that, or we have no control either, but they cannot, if it's not there, it's not there, right? Which is fantastic for them, I think. For most of them, they are happy when it's not there. And so with us, it's constant voices. With schizophrenia, it has a spontaneous onset and it comes more in waves. It's not always there. And so this is also what we read in the literature, that a lot of people who are schizophrenic stop taking their meds because either they work or they think they're not schizophrenic anymore. And when they stop, the voices come back. And as you know, with DID, that does not work. Our voices don't really go away. If we take antipsychotic medication, it varies per system. But in general, we can say that it just makes communication with our inner world, with our other folks, more difficult. But it doesn't eliminate the voices. So we might even hear more voices, but be unable to speak back and comfort them, which is really disturbing. Not for everyone. For some people who have DID and more maybe also schizophrenic, their antipsychotic medication works great. So if you need that medication, please take it. Please never stop taking medication without talking first to your prescribing doctor. In DID, we hear voices from the past. And so this can mean messages from the past. It can be the tone of voice from the past. It can be the kind of self-talk that we give ourselves now that is a reflection of the past. For example, if I'm mad at myself, I talk to myself like my mom talked to me when I grew up. And so we see that in DID a lot. Whereas in schizophrenia, there is no correlation between voices from the past or messages from the past. They just hear, whatever they hear in the moment, which also can mean sounds, not just voices, which is also good to know, I think, and be aware of. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't yet. Thank you. Another thing in DID is that we hear the voices of young parts. And we don't just hear their voices, we also hear them cry, for example. And they pop up in very good moments, for example, in the candy aisle, right? It doesn't really work like that for schizophrenic people as far as I understood. So people with schizophrenia, they might hear a child's voice, but often it's either one or, as they said it, either one of either gender. I don't think it works like that, but okay. And they don't hear multiple child parts, and they don't hear the child part when they go in the candy aisle, for example. So it doesn't trigger like that as it does for us very specifically, right? If we go in the candy aisle or the toy aisle, big chance that one of our littles is going to pop up. And that doesn't have to be the case for someone with schizophrenia. Both in DID and schizophrenia, we can hear voices that tell us what to do. We can have a command or an action that we have to partake in. The difference is that in schizophrenia, if you can ignore that voice or you don't succumb to it, then it won't happen. Whereas with DID, if you just ignore that voice and you don't ration with them or you don't negotiate with them, there's a big chance that alter will take over and do the action for you, which is why it's so important to engage with our parts. And that might work different in schizophrenia, although there was a recent study of someone who developed a game where in that game, people with schizophrenia got to fight their voices, so they got to describe their voice, not just what they sound like, but also what they imagine they look like. And they made those characters in a video game specified to this person. And in that game, they could, battle their voices. And it worked fantastic for them. So I'll put a link down below in the description for that study or research on that. I think it's a TED Talk, maybe even. I'll find it. And lastly, the big difference is that a therapist or outside person can engage with the voices of someone with DID. That is not really possible in schizophrenia. If you ask a schizophrenic voice a question, as an outside person, there's a very small chance you get a response. If you get a response, it's probably the schizophrenic person telling you what that voice is saying. Whereas in someone with DID, you can engage and actively communicate with that part in your therapy session or in, day-to-day life if it's not your therapist. And to repeat this once again, it is very important that your therapist engages with those parts when they show themselves. This was the information I wanted to share today. I hope you learned something new. If you did, please like and subscribe to this video, and we'll see you for the next time. Bye!